All right. Another good morning to everyone out in YouTube. A little bit behind the power curve here. We'll catch up in a minute. Give it a second to load up. Get everybody to say what's up. Tuesday is here. And help me out with the links, folks. I had some links set up last night and I closed my window and I didn't write any notes down. I failed. But I get something. I know there's one story I'm missing. I can't think of what it was, but I had it up in a tab last night and I ended up closing my windows. And so I know I'm missing something. I just can't remember what it was. But the weather is, that's the future. But right now it looks finally like everybody's doing all right. Barry up there in Washington's probably a little wet, or snowy, but we had one blow through last night, got some snow out of it, and it's clear now for the most part. And but the northwest there's got some snow and rain. Everybody else looks like you might be able to dry out. But we do have the side chat open. Poison Stinger is with us this morning. What's going on? Tuesday's gone with the wind. Is it windy down there? Yeah, you got to get used to that, Stinger. Morning to Nina in Southern Hark Olmsted. Hopefully you didn't flood too much. I know you guys were getting pounded. M. Long is sunny and cool, and Barry is with us as well. Good morning, everybody. So yeah, I was just commenting on the relative clearness of the weather, but they are calling for a slightly different perspective or more storms coming in, particularly on the East Coast. It looks like central U.S. might be spared this time around. Coastal flooding, beach erosion out of this storm. Of course, we're supposed to have what we just got travel across the country they were talking about. So rain in Southern California, it looks like. So that looks a little different. It says current. Snow in the Sierras, rain down Southern California. We already had our winter weather pass through. Is this from yesterday, actually? It says this morning. I don't think we're getting any snow like this. I don't know. I guess there's some clouds over the mountain. Doesn't look that bad. We'll take what we can get, though. Yeah, Stinger, you're talking about winter. They got some snow forecast for you up there. Just a few inches. It's nothing crazy. So enjoy that while you can get it. This has been a dry year. And here's more snow for the East Coast. This is Thursday night or Friday, it says. So not immediately. And on down in your area too, M. Long, it looks like. Not on this one, but on this one. So be ready. If you didn't have everything high and dry then, it's going to be hard to get it fixed between now and then. Yeah, Nina, are you still digging out's the wrong word. Drying out, having to squeegee out the area, siphon everything out. It looks pretty brutal. It was pretty brutal. We were looking at it yesterday, all the flooding, and they had tornadoes as well, I believe, in Missouri. Bad stuff. Good morning, Walter Davis. How you doing? More snow coming your way. I guess is that overtime work for you, or just But knowing that the weather's cleared up a little bit, everybody will have a little bit of a restful day on that end. Again, if you got any stories that you've seen of importance, put them in the side chat or tell me about them. I'll look them up, whichever. Because there's something I'm missing because I had it last night up and I didn't write my notes down, and I ended up with some last minute stuff. I know I'm missing something. I just can't remember what it was. But again, it's kind of focusing on the major stuffs on the Florida situation, all the gun control talk. But I did find this story on Venezuela. We continue to see the collapse of the state down there. I guess you'd say it's a good thing the prisoners are eating rats and pigeons first before the regular people, but it's definitely going downhill. Their story's been out for a year now or so of the just average everyday people having to scrounge around for food. So why it's taking so long for the prisoners to get around to this is beyond me. This is on Breitbart, so it has a little bit different perspective to it than some of the other articles we read. Like we've read ones in the past, they never talk about the socialism of the country. And in Breitbart, right up front, the failed socialist state. So it's a different perspective than what I would call a more accurate perspective on the failings of Venezuela than a lot of the other mainstream media puts it in. What non-governmental agency are they talking about was in here? Oh, the name of the non-government agency is Window to Liberty. I guess they're down there doing some work. Regularly eat rats and other type of rodents. They do have, they got a large rodent down there they eat. I can't remember what it's called. And of course, they eat guinea pigs down there too, I think, anyway. But pretty bad stuff, bad conditions. Don't get arrested in Venezuela. You thought Mexico was bad. So there's more anecdotals of the collapse of that state. I was over on the Zero Hedge as well this morning. Nutria, that's it, Poison. Is that the one they have down there, Nutria? This article popped up since we're talking about gun control all the time. Well, it's already been enacted. It's just a matter of phasing it in slowly but surely. This is on Zero Hedge. And I know we talked about this way back when in the Dragon. There were special teams set up by California to preemptively go in and take people's firearms. Very little judicial oversight and definitely no day in court. And then they would do your day in court after the fact. Well, we took them. Now you come and tell us why you need them type thing. A lot of it was happening to folks with PTSD down in San Diego and stuff. And that was years ago. I mean, I'd really have to dig to find the links. But here's a news story up about this. And this team that they'd established quite a while back that's become more active over time of the ones that are exactly doing this. So as we know, they do want to take our guns, even though they always say no one wants to take your guns. It's a classical mental game they play with you, but also the bystanders watching. Here he has a good write-up on why let's get serious. They have two reasons. First, it takes power away from the citizenry. Liberals love that. Second, gun rights are important to normal Americans because the fact we maintain arms means we are not mere subjects. We are citizens with the power to defend our freedoms. Liberals hate that we have the dignity. Taking our guns would humiliate us and show us who is boss. They want to disarm us not because of gun crime. Name a liberal who wants to really do anything about Chicago as opposed to harassing law-abiding normals, as he calls them here, but because they hate us and want us to see us submit. And you get the same type of feel for people often, especially you. A lot of liberals, when you talk about the Confederacy, it's all about the submission of the people. It has nothing to do with being just or right. So the California cops that do this job, this is out of a Washington Times, they reference. They actually got a Tennessean to move to California, which means he's probably prior military. They have a 6-person team of California Department of Justice that are coming for your guns, but only if you no longer have the authority to own one in the state that has tightened firearm laws in increments over the years. His division, this law enforcement agency, is the only one in the country assigned specifically to track down and take guns from felons, the mentally ill, and others whose Second Amendment rights have been curtailed in court because of public safety concerns. Washington Post points out so a dozen years ago, the state set up a database that flags law enforcement officials when a registered gun owner is convicted of a felon, mentally ill, all about that registry. They've had the registry in place, and now they can use it. Again, what classifies as a felony? Class C felony? I mean, where does it, or one of about 37 qualifying misdemeanors as well. I wish I could find the link, but there was a story back in 2012-13 of this team hitting PTSD people pretty hard. They had because I guess they're having a hard time tracking it. They figured out a way to do it between the links between when people get out in the VA healthcare system and they stay in California. As documented here, it has taken tens of thousands of guns out of the hands of people prohibited from having them. But don't worry, they're not coming for your guns, right? So California, being the progressive state that we know that it is, so they confirmed 10,226 people on their current list. That they're working on. So they're working on 10,000 targets plus right now. It says last year, agencies 33,999 pistols and long guns, investigating more than 8,500 people in the process. This continues. The last comment here is the timing of the promotional piece from the Washington Post is fascinating, coming just days after White House said it is considering the idea of using restraining orders to take firearms away from people considered dangerous as a part of its response to last week's massacres in Florida. Two people familiar with what matter said. That's about where they end it. So there's your template. That's how it's going to spread. I'm surprised Massachusetts and others haven't taken up on the idea yet and enacted their own similar policies. Back in the side chat, y'all are for quiet this morning. What's going on out there? Y'all just not paying attention? Looks like I'm going through okay. I'm still getting out, right? Yeah, it says I am. The lack of comments has got me baffled at this point. All right. But Poison Stinger says, you think they'll be able to ban bump stocks without changing the law on what makes a weapon full auto? They went to the DOJ to ask for that opinion, I think. That's what Trump did. He went to go tell them, you need to do something without changing the law. Executive action, executive branch action is, super law. It's superseding the law, basically. So they're expected to be able to do something without changing the law on what makes a weapon full auto. Because if you legally look at the definition, one pull of the trigger, the multiple rounds, every pull of the trigger is not a full auto weapon, and a bump stock is not a full auto weapon. Again, you can do the same effects with your finger, with your just manipulating the way you hold the weapon a certain way. It's incrementalism if it does go the way it looks like we're going. Hey, Nina, have a good day. Have a good day working. Get her done. Thanks, Stinger. I guess we're still 5x5 or 3x3 maybe. So on the financial side, they're talking about rate hikes in the market. The market popped up a little bit yesterday, but there's several stories out. Whoa, hush up. The conflict is coming between interest rates and bond market, and it's one of those things. Do you want to see the stock market go down, or you want to see the entire rest of the economy go down, inflation get out of hand, etc.? There's competing interests that are going to come to a head here. But I guess he talked yesterday, the new guy that's getting stuck with all this mess that Yellen and Bernanke made. They're same old talking points. But there was a story about the housing market. Price 6%. Was that in here? Yeah, home prices surged 6.3%. Housing shortage pretty much in all big urban areas. There's one out here especially because of the Tesla and everything else. But housing shortage, Seattle, Las Vegas, San Francisco, Chicago, Cleveland, and DC saw the smallest gains. Well, who wants to live there, right? And nobody that works in DC lives in DC anyway. They live in Northern Virginia. That's why it's so jacked up there. All those politicians and lobbyists moved to Northern Virginia and screw it up. But housing shortages are a foreteller of all this, and the big question is who's buying now that prices have went up so much? Because are people going to be forced to rent because they can't afford a house anymore? Because it's gotten it's out of hand, in my opinion. Because there's additional stories out about how wage growth hasn't grown. When you talk about inflation, wages haven't grown nearly at the rate of inflation. Even though they keep trying to boost inflation to 2%, they keep talking about that. But all this money that's getting dumped in is going in the stock market. That's why the stock market's crazy. It all gets funneled into banks that put it into there. All these one-offs and bailouts put into wages and things that are actually going to produce what you would call inflation, the ability to push up prices. But they have to have inflation to keep their system going. And they want to control it, but they're having issues. And where's that story on job wage growth? If it's on here, if I didn't see it somewhere else. Yeah. You can make a bump stock too. Will that be a felony too? I wonder, says Stinger. Yes, Darren, I think if you 3D printed a bump stock, I think possession of one. I don't know if they well they technically they can't ex post facto the whole deal. They're not supposed to be able to make you a felon off of something that you already own. That's why in the original assault weapons ban, it was just all new manufacture. All those new magazines had that stamp on them. You could still have old magazines, but as we know, they'll try their best to get around that. Um, Barry Wood, belt loop felony, right? Yeah, you carry around your felony device with you everywhere you go, most days. Spreading measles around New York. Is that a story, Poison? Uh, Poison Stinger. Australian Jehovah's Witnesses spreading measles around New York. I don't even know how to wrap my head around Jehovah's Witnesses from Australia getting measles, spreading measles in New York. I'm not sure that that would be the way that's working, if that's really the story headline. Oh, don't worry, you can survive the measles. The measles is not like deadly. It can cause complications that can lead to death. It's if you're older, especially young kids, but it's just the measles. It's almost just a little bit worse than chicken pox. It's slightly more contagious too. It's not the smallpox, that's for sure. Smallpox will kill you at a much, much higher rate. But you got to remember a lot of that founding generation, a lot of them did get the smallpox and survived miraculously without vaccines. But it is much more deadly of a disease compared to your measles and your chicken pox. Don't get the monkeypox either. Monkeypox is bad. But yeah, their story about wage growth not keeping up and what's really limiting the inflationary policies they're trying to promote here is wages aren't going up. So that's going to match up with these housing prices jumping up so far. They're way ahead of wages, 6.3% housing price bump. That would I clicked off that article, didn't I? Is way ahead of wages. So how are people affording this stuff, right? Interest rates are going up, so that means home loans are going up. So are they just selling their old things and rolling in their equity? Maybe, but it doesn't get you anywhere. You're not getting ahead of anything. People are paying it forward, I guess you would say. Here's a quote: across 20 cities covered by this index, house price index, the average increase from financial crisis low is 62%. Over the same period, inflation was 12.4%. So I would call that inflationary bubble. Housing prices way ahead of inflation. Mortgage rates rose from 4 to 4.4% since the start of the year, which I think interest rates were at a low back in like October, August timeframe. So sales of both newly built and existing homes fell in January, although home prices were still higher. There you go. So the market's going to throw a fit as long as it can to prevent their gravy train of easy money from going away. That's why this market volatility is going to continue if they do these rate hikes, because that sucks money out of the stock market because people can get better deals elsewhere when interest rates are higher. And with the bond market doing what it was doing, creeping up there, let's see if are we at 3 today yet? Where are we at? Oh, we're still 2 points. So we're back below 2.9. But that's people are talking about it. It's going to keep creeping up. People are talking about 4 by the end of the year. That's really going to cause issues with those that make their living in the casino or the stock market. Yeah, Poison Stinger comments there. Yeah, my mortgage isn't very low, but still cheaper than renting. Yeah, and that's especially historically. They were talking about it the other day. Historically, comparing mortgage rates now to then is like our parents smack us upside the head. I mean, back in the 70s, 80s, 8% more an 8% interest rate on your mortgage was a deal. But really, the interest rates have been offset by the inflationary prices. So it's probably all works out in the end with now houses being seen as investment, increase that demand, and kind of everybody's in the deal. So there's more money flowing towards it, which raises prices too. So maybe that's offset a little bit and you're still paying just as much as they did overall, but it's just not baked into the interest rate like it used to be, which would the money going directly to the bank. So maybe, if when your purchase price and everything, at least some of that money gets to the original owner buyer through the price, but the bank not making out the killing with the interest rate that people were paying back then. All right, we're about ready to wind it up here. About 5 more minutes. Any other thing out there people want to talk about? Throw it in the side chat. Comment the like. I thought I had some wrenches out here, but I think maybe that was the other day. I know Kevin Stoll showed me that you can't put a link in there unless you're a moderator. I had no idea. So I got to have at least a few out there to send me some links if necessary, help out. But kind of closing it out with some good news. South Carolina giving away guns to teachers that want it. Of course, it's not forced. Everybody gets all this thing about teachers shouldn't be forced to carry guns. Well, they're not being. They're being allowed to if they want to. Just don't get all indignant about the whole thing when you bring that up. But the state representative announced a contest on Monday to give away 3 Smith & Wessons, one to a K-12 teacher, one to a teacher or staff in higher education, and a third to anyone who wishes to participate in the drawing. Interesting angle. Promoting what you preach, I guess. He's also offering free concealed carry training towards obtaining their permits, concealed carry permit. South Carolina has introduced a bill which allows teachers to carry. There's a host of them. I guess they're just slightly different. Why they would have to have 5 different bills to address the same thing, it's beyond me. And he's quoted as saying, if you have a teacher, and Representative Long is his name, if you have a teacher that was adept at firearms, this is the president that said this. If you had a teacher who was adept at firearms, they could very well end the attack very quickly. Yeah. And the good thing about a suggestion like that, and we're going to look at it very strongly. Can't really argue with that. But it should be up to the local school districts. It should have nothing to do with what the president says or does. Keep the president out of our schools would be my message. Your local state and school district should be the ones determining this and pushing that message out to get people armed in the school. And like a good friend, Poison Stinger comes through with a link before I Oh, that's the Australia story. Okay. And tourists spread measles. Also on Zero Hedge, speaking of the inflation, they bring up a key indicator. Inflation based upon too much money chasing too few goods. quotes of many an economic professor, right? It's when people start bidding more money than something's actually worth, causes inflation. But does it really? Okay, go through some economic graphs. Are they actually going to get to what's the key indicator we're looking for here? M2 money, is that what we're talking about? Yeah, they're really getting the depths of economics here. So he says instead of looking at M2, which is a measure of money in the market, he says that's what economists do. Focus instead on the amount of money banks pump into the economy when they deliver loan proceeds. Bank created money, which he calls M63. I think there's another term for it though too, technically. Flows directly into GDP, thanks to the charters that allow banks to produce money from nothing when they make loans to buy securities. That's the whole 9-to-1 ratio part of our fiat currency system. They actually don't have to hold $1 for every 9 they make. So you're going to have to read this yourself to get into to really understand it. I could sit here and talk about it, but you have to really wrap your head around. And there's another link here. There's links to outside stories on it to help you get your head wrapped around how banks make money. And he's saying this is how you're really going to need to watch this to understand how inflation's going to start coming. So just close the bottom paragraph. The chart shows bank loans lifting spending above the amount spenders can fund from prior income, which fattens the circular flow, boosting GDP. Bank-funded spending might lift real GDP or inflation, or both. But however it works in the economy, we can find a correlation with nominal GDP. And we can demonstrate the correlation with either loan or money data as long as we define money as bank-created money, M63, not M2, as normal economists. I'll put that in the link out in the side chat and so you can do that on your own, because understanding that inflationary thing is one of the reasons why we all have such a hard time understanding it, because it is hard to understand. So he's saying there's the normal way they measure it, spending to income, but when you add the new bank credit on top of that, making it wider or broader, that's how you look for inflation. That's his argument. Interesting take on it. I can't spend all day. We got to wrap this up. But Poison Stinger did drop that measles story in the side chat. Health officials fear an Australian tourist spread measles across New York. I thought everybody in New York was inoculated against measles. Or is it all the illegals that are getting the measles? 90% infection rate for non-immunized people. It's very, very, very infectious, that's for sure. About 9 in 10 kids in the United States receive their measles vaccines. Vaccines effective above 90%, yada, yada. So why is this the issue? So I know we have to get when you go overseas, you have to have all your. So we're allowing Australians to come in without their proof of vaccinations. Is that what it is? We're tougher on our own kids going to our own schools that we pay for, but we're not tough on visitors to this country and requiring them to have the same type of protections health wise. Interesting concept. I guess it's one of those things. Money talks. We would rather have their tourist money than provide the same protections. It would be one take on that. That's a hot take for you. But we're going to wrap it up, folks. Thanks for hanging in there. Thanks for coming to join us. There's always something to find. We will see you on Hump Day tomorrow. Thanks everybody in the side chat. We'll put some links in the discussion bar below to follow up with if you're watching this on the back end and weren't able to have the benefit of the side chat. And make sure you're checking out those cards in the top right corner for other channels to go check out on the YouTube that you may not be aware of. Everybody have a good day. Go out, live free.